In this video, I'm explaining why, in my opinion, the good enough mentality of hearing aid treatment is not good enough. Coming up. Hi guys, Cliff Olson, Doctor of Audiology and founder of Applied Hearing Solutions in Phoenix, Arizona. And on this channel, I cover a bunch of hearing-related information to help make you a better informed consumer. So if you're into that, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to click the bell to receive a notification every time I post a new video. There is no such thing as a perfect hearing aid. And yes, there are a lot of amazing hearing aids out there, but there is not one single hearing aid on this planet that I would consider perfect. No matter how much research and development goes into designing hearing aids, there will always be flaws inside of hearing aids, especially as our expectations continue to grow. And just like it's impossible to find a perfect hearing aid, it is also impossible to fit and program a hearing aid perfectly. There will always be a different setting, a different program, a different level of amplification, a different compression setting, or a different feature that must be activated. And given the sheer quantity of possible adjustments, it's literally impossible to adjust all of them perfectly. However, the sheer act of striving for perfection when selecting and programming a hearing aid is what leads to better outcomes with hearing aid performance. The problem is, most hearing care providers subscribe to the good enough mentality of hearing treatment. What do I mean by this? Well, basically, the overwhelming majority of hearing care providers end up fitting their patients with the exact same hearing aid regardless of their patient's individual wants and needs. The vast majority of hearing care providers also do not follow best practices when fitting and programming hearing aids, nor do they follow best practices when providing their patients with long-term follow-up care. So why do the majority of hearing care providers do this? Well, it comes down to something that we call the law of diminishing returns. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, that's great, Cliff, but what the heck is the law of diminishing returns? To understand this law, we first need to have a quick economics lesson. In economics, diminishing returns is the decrease in the marginal output of a production process as the amount of a single factor of production is incrementally increased, while the amounts of all other factors of production stay constant. Basically what they're saying is that when you increase the amount of work that you put into something, at some point the amount of benefit that you get from all of that work will get smaller and smaller. Let me give you a non-hearing related analogy first using running. Let's just say that if you were to run 10 hours a week, that would allow you to be able to run a 4-hour marathon, which is a very respectable time. Let's assume that if you were to increase the amount of training that you do by an additional 5 hours per week, that would allow you to run a 3-hour and 45-minute marathon. So basically, adding an additional 5 hours of training time allowed you to shave off 15 minutes from your total marathon time. But what if I said if you were to increase your training by an additional 5 hours, meaning going from 10 hours to 20 hours, that you were only able to reduce your marathon time by an additional 5 minutes, meaning that you are now running a 3-hour and 40-minute marathon. Instead of shaving off an additional 15 minutes from your marathon, you're only shaving off an additional 5 minutes with an additional 5 hours of training per week. This is the law of diminishing returns. Just because you increase the amount of hours that you spend training to run a marathon, it does not mean that the total marathon time that you have is going to drop down the same amount for each additional hour of training that you do. So the question in this analogy becomes, what marathon time is good enough for you? Ultimately, a 4-hour marathon starts to look pretty good when you consider the amount of training that it would take you to get that 4-hour marathon down to a 3-hour and 40-minute marathon. Now let's take a look at the law of diminishing returns when it comes to hearing treatment. Many hearing care providers, and many online hearing aid companies for that matter, have determined that providing a bare minimum standard of care will result in moderate hearing aid performance for their patients. This minimum standard of care results in a one-size-fits-all hearing aid recommendation and an auto-fit or first-fit programming of hearing aids which are intended to get an individual in the ballpark of their hearing loss prescription. If with only 30 minutes of effort they were able to give you a 70% improvement in your hearing ability, there is a good chance that you'd be willing to keep those hearing aids. In their eyes, this level of care is considered good enough to make you moderately happy with your hearing aids, and ultimately good enough for you not to return them for a refund. Let's assume that if these providers were to incorporate some best practices and spend an additional hour with you, that it would result in a 20% improvement in your overall hearing ability, taking you from 70% of your maximum to 90% of your maximum hearing potential. Then, let's assume that these providers were to perform comprehensive best practices and spend an additional 3 hours with you, that this would result in an additional 5% of hearing performance, taking you from 90% to 95% of your total performance capability. You can see how this additional effort results in diminishing returns. I can spend as much time as I want with you, but the amount of benefit that you get from that time gets smaller and smaller as time goes on. But it is this commitment to following best practices and spending the time to do so that gets you to your maximum performance capability. So the question becomes, would you rather hear good enough, or would you rather hear your absolute best? Unfortunately, most individuals with hearing loss are completely okay with good enough, and therefore, most hearing care providers are as well. I, however, am not okay with good enough. I believe that this mentality is a plague inside of the hearing loss community, and as a result, leads to chronic underperformance and low expectations with hearing aids. Unless hearing care providers take the time necessary to follow best practices and strive for perfection, you will never hear your best. And in my book, that is unacceptable. But the only way that this will ever change is if you demand more and increase your expectations. If you continue to go to providers who come up with excuses to not follow best practices like real ear measurement, then you are basically casting your vote for the good enough mentality. But if you take a stand and refuse to go to a hearing care provider who does not follow best practices, then you are casting your vote for perfection. Now, like I mentioned before, I understand that it is not possible to achieve perfection with hearing aids or hearing treatment in general. But it is this striving for perfection that results in truly great performance with hearing aids. So what are you going to do? Are you going to demand perfection from your hearing care provider, or are you going to settle for good enough? That's it for this video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. If you liked the video, please share it. If you want to see other videos just like this one, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, feel free to check out my website, drcliffaud.com.